Sorry about that, folks. I thought I was streaming, but I guess I wasn't. So I'm gonna give it like another like 10 minutes before we begin tonight's stream. A little later than usual, but yeah, a little bit of a different episode tonight. So bear with the technical hiccups here and there, but we will be starting pretty soon. There it is, Skullgirls second encore. So many dive kicks. Ooh, the hype beam.
It's time for our final game announcement at EVO. So let's head on over to none other than Sharpie for our last game at EVO this year.
Thank you so much, Tasty Steve and Say Jam. I'm Sharpie, and I am so incredibly pleased to announce that Skullgirls will be an official main game at EVO 2022.
And looking to close out Sonic Fox this close.
Very, very simple to just chip out from that moment.
Oh! And Sonic Fox takes it 3-2 in a nail biter. I don't think I could have written a better grand final set than that for the two close friends to come down to the wire. That is going to go down in history.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? Oh, wait a minute. Do not pay attention to the thing. Hang on. Hang on. There we go. Okay. Your immersion is now better. Anyways, hey everyone. A little later than usual. Hope you don't mind, but yeah, welcome to another episode, another edition of the opening night. And yeah, tonight's a little different. I think I said that last time too. I think it was, yeah. I played in a tournament last week. Tonight, it's a little different than the usual thing we go into. Tonight, we actually are going to watch the GDC Rolling with the Punches, Reinventing Fighting Games from Mobile. It is a panel that our beloved co-founder, creative director of Hidden Variable, Mighty Zug, hosted at this year's GDC. And I watched it already, but I want to rewatch with you guys and probably get a better understanding of some of the things he's talking about. But it'd be cool to kind of sit down and kind of actually like watch the panel talking about how essentially how Skullgirls Mobile was made. What were the thoughts behind it, and what were some of the things that were going into each decision and transforming Skullgirls second encore to mobile. But yeah, we'll definitely watch that tonight. But before we do, per usual, give me a second here as I get ready here to transition. So, if you enjoy the stuff we do on a weekly basis, on Twitter, here on Twitch, on YouTube, on every social media platform, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/sgmolly. I post there behind the scenes stuff, future plans, and you supporting the scene at the same time. So much of my ideas that I have that I will put out into the world once it's ready to go are most often there on the Patreon before it goes out. So I know I have like several ideas in mind. I know that I'm working on, I got 2 or 3 of them at the moment. But yeah, I am. Yeah, that's the best place to support us. Plus, also like, hey, screw the Twitch sub 50-50. Nah, with Patreon at the very least, we'll get most of that money versus Twitch. But this is a little outdated. But 86.com is the sponsor. Has always been the big supporter of us. So definitely check them out when you get the chance. You could be our affiliate link is below the stream under in one of the panels, as well as in chat if you hit !86 the number. and you'll be able to check out some of their cool gear. And if you use our code to buy stuff on their site, you will get a cut as well as they do. So, especially the Skullgirls stuff as well. So definitely check it out when you get the chance. All right. So, like I said, a little different tonight than the usual open lobby. People can come in and play Skullgirls, and I talk about Skullgirls stuff in the past week or so. So, we're going to actually watch a video by the Mighty Zug. Hey, just make sure I get that properly fit in. There we go. Cool. So yeah, this is a panel from the Mighty Zug. And again, I watched it before, but I want to watch it with you guys. The ideas and thoughts of turning Skullgirls into a mobile game was something that I didn't think would happen in the time I've been playing this game. And it'd be interesting to hear what details went into making it happen from Mighty Zug to make it work. So yeah, I might be pausing here and there to kind of give more like insight, but be watching, listening, and I think it'd be interesting too for those who are wanting to know, like, oh, how was the sausage was made for Skullgirls Mobile. So yeah. Anyways, let me turn off music. Oh wow, and the man himself is in here. Let's go. Hey, I'll be hanging out for a bit. May not be able to stay the whole time in case folks have questions or want to discuss. Oh, that's sick, Mighty Zug. That's awesome. Heck yeah. Damn, can you tweet that out? And I can retweet it on the stream, Molly, real quick. That's actually rad, man. Holy shit. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, I'm gonna wait for a second before you do that. That's fucking rad. Let's see. Oh hell yeah! Thanks, man. That's sick as fuck. Hell yeah, yeah. Because I watched the panel before tonight, so I have an idea of when I'm gonna watch again. But I'm kind of much more keen-eyed to some things just that stood out to me. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed your panel at GDC. And yeah, I'm hoping to share the wealth yet again to people who have not seen it or kind of give a different viewpoint of it. The more I watch it, and like I said, I'll pause every once in a while to give a point or to kind of analyze something. But it was an interesting panel on the first watch through, and I'll probably have another enjoyable time on the second watch through. But yeah, and then for those who are watching YouTube or watching this, you guys missed out. The Mighty Zug himself is actually in here in this chat. This is what you get when you don't tune in. Ha ha. Yeah. Okay, I just want to double check and making sure that the audio is gonna come through. Let me see. Oh wait, hang on. I got unmuted for a second.
For rolling with the punches.
Okay, there we go. Yep, audio is in. Audio is ready to go. Tweet sent. Sweet. Thanks, man. I'll go ahead and retweet it. Woohoo! You're the best, man. You're the best. Heck yeah. I'll give it a few minutes. But yeah, like, yeah, it was very cool. I used to go to GDC a while back, actually, funny enough. When I used to live in NorCal, I used to go to GDC a lot. Try to network with people, mingle. And yeah, I want to say I went like at least 5 times, I think. So it's a fun time in general. It's pretty cool. You get to play some indie games that are pretty sick. And like yeah, no, GDC is a fun time in general. So yeah, I miss it. But yeah, some cool stuff. Give me a second here. I'm just doing some retweeting here on all my accounts. Retweet on my VTuber account, on my personal, on the SG Molly one. Okay, cool, awesome, cool. All right. So, and for those who are watching at home or who may be watching this later on, I All right, everyone. So I will begin the video watching the GDC panel Roll with the Punches, reinventing fighting games for mobile by the wonderful Mighty Zug at GDC. So, without further ado, let us begin.
Reinventing fighting games for mobile. As you can probably tell from the title of the talk, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about fighting games today, in particular our journey of bringing Skullgirls to mobile. But the hope is that some of the techniques that we ultimately learned along the way will be helpful for you if you're planning on bringing any kind of complex or challenging genre or mechanic to a new audience or new platform. So hopefully there'll be takeaways for you regardless of whether or not you have any fighting game related stuff on your immediate roadmap. However, this is still a fighting game talk, and you can't talk about fighting games these days without talking about Desperate Housewives. Introducing players to a new genre in general is tricky, and while Skullgirls had its challenges, the most extreme example of this for me was something I experienced earlier in my career. In a former life, I was the lead designer of Desperate Housewives, the game, and as you might imagine, our audience was super casual. This was intended for fans of the show. It was meant to be like an impulse buy at checkout, and maybe they'd played The Sims, but we had to acknowledge that a lot of our players may not only have a stigma about our genre, this kind of blend of Sims and adventure gameplay.
What up,
but just games
Steam
in
Gorilla?
general. And it's really critical to make sure that those players felt welcome and comfortable knowing that it was going to be a new and intimidating experience for them, and that uncertainty and anxiety that they have doesn't go away once they've actually purchased or downloading your game. And the fact that we somehow also nabbed PC Gamer's Adventure Game of the Year that year showed me that you can actually...
Yeah, I'm doing well tonight.
Be successful, which certainly helped embolden me.
Thanks for asking.
This journey of trying to bring a core game like a fighting game like Skullgirls to a more casual audience. So, as a quick intro, hi, I'm Charlie. I'm the co-founder of Hidden Variable. I've been working on games for about 20 years. We're a small indie dev based out in LA. When we first started, way back in 2010, our motto...
That's pretty wild. You guys made threes, honestly.
Games like the grocery bagging puzzle game Baggage.
I heard a lot of good things about threes way back in the day.
However, when the opportunity presented itself for us to work on Skullgirls, as a lifelong fighting game fan, it was something that I leapt at. And our motto shifted a bit to being kind of taking intimidating experiences and bringing them to larger audiences without watering down what makes it special. And for those of you that aren't familiar, Skullgirls has a long and complex history, but in brief, the original console game was made by another studio and published by Autumn Games. Hidden Variable developed the mobile version in 2015. That was right around when the original game stopped getting content updates and DLC. But then, as of 2020, the mobile game was doing well. We started adding new characters, and we wanted to go through and bring those to the console game. And so now...
Just a side note, like, I have forgotten that content stopped at 2015 and then only picked up back in 2020, which is wild to me. So it's like, oh shit, I didn't realize it was for that long. I felt it was like maybe like 3 years in between that time period, but it's kind of wild to think about that it was actually 5 years.
Nowadays, Hidden Variable is responsible for development for both the mobile game and the console game, with the support of many of the original developers who are at a new studio called Future Club. The console game, Skullgirls Second Encore, recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary, which is very exciting.
Woo! 10 more years, baby.
Game at Evo last year, which is pretty cool. That tournament was won by Sonic Fox. Congrats, Sonic. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Skullgirls, it's a 2D team-based fighting game, and all fighting games are complex in their own way, but Skullgirls is particularly so. If you haven't seen Skullgirls in action, here's some footage from Grand Finals at Evo last year. So you can see there's a lot going on. Beyond like standard fighting game stuff like mix-ups and specials and supers and projectiles, you've got teammate tag-ins and assists. There's often 4 characters on screen at once. There's a lot going on even if you are an advanced and experienced fighting game fan, let alone if you're brand new to fighting games. So porting a fighting game to mobile or bringing it...
Yeah, it's kind of wild looking at this, like...
Skullgirls, particularly so, figuring out which of these...
Just like thinking about, oh shit, this is actually more complicated than the average viewer can take.
There's a tremendous opportunity for fighting games on mobile. It was an undersaturated genre and still is an undersaturated genre, unlike puzzle games or RPGs. And everything out there at the time tended to occupy 2 extremes. You had kind of this full fighting game port, which at the time was best exemplified by Street Fighter 4 Champion Edition, which you may know is the game you might have accidentally downloaded when you were looking for Street Fighter 4.
I actually did play that actually a while back.
Chunky, virtual stick that's on the screen and all those on-screen buttons. And even though they did a good job of kind of recapturing that experience, a facsimile of playing the console game, it clearly wasn't designed with mobile first. It was kind of like a lesser version of a game that you probably should be playing on a different platform. And then you had this other extreme, which is kind of the mobile RPG that featured a fighting game IP. And the most emblematic version of that was Injustice, which is awesome. It had all the assets from the console game, and it had a lot of cool RPG features. But the actual gameplay itself didn't really feel like a fighting game. It felt like you were playing a mobile action game with kind of fighting game trappings. And it was still really cool, but we felt like there was an opportunity for something that would ultimately be somewhere in the middle. Another more modern example of that is the aforementioned Street Fighter Duel. It's basically AFK Arena, but with Street Fighter assets in it.
Yeah.
Like an idle
I
game.
heard good stuff about Street Fighter Duel, actually. I saw somebody play that Salty last time.
And still, frankly, opportunity to this day to have something that is really designed from the ground up for mobile that captures the experience of going through and playing a fighting game. So if you're not familiar with Skullgirls Mobile, I'm going to show off some gameplay here where we talk a little bit about some of our design philosophies that led to how we went through and built the game itself. So this is all gameplay executed through taps and swipes and whatnot on your mobile device. So one of our goals, like I mentioned, was we didn't just want to port the game to mobile. We wanted to build a mobile fighting game from the ground up with the benefit of all the assets that we had at our disposal from the original console game. I've always thought of fighting games as like an aspirational genre, something that a lot of players admire from afar, but are otherwise too intimidated to engage with because of the complexity of inputs or the competitive nature of things. And so the hope was that this could be a gateway game for people. This could be a means by which it would be accessible for folks who had otherwise shied away from fighting games. But we still wanted to go through and satisfy those core fighting game players that I mentioned before. We wanted it to be deep enough to like scratch that fighting game itch for people that wanted to play it on the go. And so we wanted to capture that sense of intermediate level play where the mechanics of fighting games really start to blossom. So that sense of creativity and combo expression and sense of mastery. And we'll talk a lot about how our techniques for how we accomplish that over the course of the talk. Some high-level strategies that you'll hear me referencing multiple times.
Let's go, Molly.
Figuring out ways in which you can help players feel comfortable and clever throughout the experience.
Sorry, I had to pop every time Molly's on screen.
Thinking of your game as kind of a different path up the same mountain to achieve a similar end. Celebrating unique experiences, figuring out what it is about your genre that is truly unique and making that the centerpiece and figuring out how you can go through and build towards that. And then questioning essential genre features. They may actually be different from what you otherwise think. And then all of this ultimately starts with, well, we're going to have, Molly will pop in from time to time over the course of this talk and remind you of these things. But all of this entire process ultimately starts with understanding your audience, or in our case,
I know that GIF. I used before on Twitter.
So expertise is a tricky thing. It can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. If you're going to embark on this journey to go through and bring a new experience to a new audience, it's probably because you love that particular thing. You're really close to it. That ultimately can be tricky because you may not actually have a proper understanding of what the first-time genre experience is like for a brand new player. You are not your entire audience. As a result, you really need to go out of your way to trust the insight of people who have actually never played your game before, which is really difficult to do. You know, much like in G.I. Joe the movie when Roadblock is blinded and has to trust Cobra Commander to guide him to degenerate into a snake. We all saw this. You all know this reference. I don't need to explain this reference. I like to think of new players as reluctant students. So something about your game piqued their interest and brought them to your door, but the burden is still on you to sell them on why it's ultimately for them. And to do that, you need to make sure you have lots of different perspectives. This isn't just like focus tests and things like that. You need people that are involved regularly throughout development that you can check in with to make sure that you're ultimately satisfying the breadth of different players at your disposal. So on our team, for example, I kind of played this middle role. I've been playing fighting games my whole life. I was the Street Fighter king of my arcade when I was growing up. And I've gone to tournaments. I haven't done well in tournaments, but I've gone to tournaments. And amongst my normal friends, I'm like the fighting game guy. But amongst my fighting game friends, I skew a little bit more casual. I don't have like frame data memorized. I'm more play-by-feel, especially these days. You know, on the more novice side, my wife Erin is a game developer who's been playing games her whole life, but she never really dabbled in fighting games all that much. And so it's super valuable to be able to bring builds to her and say, hey, what do you think of this? Are these things clicking? Does this make sense? Is this intuitive? So we could get that rapid feedback along the way. And then on the other extreme, we have
let's go, Liam.
And he knows fighting games backwards and forwards. He also goes to tournaments, but he
Liam the homie.
So gets some top 8s. And he's fluent in all things fighting games, especially Skullgirls. So we wanted to make sure that he could really sink his teeth into something here. There's something meaningful here for him. And being able to check in with all these audiences along the way was essential to make sure that we were actually satisfying all of their collective needs.
Yeah, you got a good collection there.
Real
Real good collection of staff to fine-tune Nishi Mobile for sure.
Marketing materials, our app store presence, how we talk to the press, how we talk to the community, really shapes how you talk about your game, impacts how your players talk about your game. It shapes their impressions of what they ultimately think. And each of those two audiences basically had different stigmas and preconceptions that we had to overcome early on. Casual players, people who are intrigued by but otherwise intimidated by fighting games, who are kind of tentatively interested in checking out a mobile fighting game, their stigma was mostly about the fighting game genre itself. Things like fighting games aren't made for new players. Fighting games are too complicated. The competitive nature of fighting games are really intimidating and challenging and stressful, all of which can be deterrents that prevent them from saying, you know what, maybe it's just not for me. So a lot of our messaging was basically saying, look, this game is designed to be
Yeah,
accessible
yeah,
and
yeah. It's like you got
for the
great
player,
people
that we also
working on
have
your
to
on
say,
SG
okay,
Mobile.
it's okay. We wanted to say that the game uses just taps and swipes. These are all inputs you're familiar with. If you play mobile games, you don't need to learn crazy joystick inputs or all that stuff you might have been intimidated by. This game is designed for you. And lastly, there's a lot of single-player content in Skullgirls Mobile. It's not just a PvP experience, and so you can have a great time even if you never play anybody else.
I still need to catch up on SG Mobile story. I'm way behind.
Fighting game players, on the other hand, had a totally different set of concerns. We had to prove our worthiness to them. Their stigma was based on mobile versions, frankly, of not just fighting games, but other traditional console games. A lot of them are, why would I go through and play a crappy port of something as opposed to playing the real thing? There's no such thing as an authentic fighting game experience on mobile. Or this looks like something that's just a shameless free-to-play mobile cash grab. So a lot of those reassurances we had to provide them were, look, this is Skullgirls Fighting RPG is the technical name of the game. It's meant to reframe their perspective. This is a different experience. It's not trying to be one-to-one with what you played before, but it's meant to capture the essence of playing a fighting game. So hopefully that reframing allows them to be a little bit more open-minded about what the experience will be. But at some point, it's also, you just have to trust us. It is a fighting game. Just give it a shot, and you'll see what we mean. And then at the end, really emphasizing that this is a game that's made with care. It's meant to be built from the ground up. It's intended to be supported for years. It's not just kind of like a shameless cash grab or just some kind of marketing gimmick or whatever it may be. So those are all parts of the messaging that we needed to do for core fighting game players. And thankfully, it all worked out really well. We had a lot of really positive
Yeah.
gaming press from casual players.
Hell yeah.
Especially proud
As much as it deserved, honestly.
Fighting game fan. We have almost 500,000 5-star reviews. The game is doing great. 5 years in and still growing. So really proud of everything that we accomplished. So how did we do it? A lot of it starts with asking a fundamental question. You can apply this obviously to whatever genre you might be considering, but why are fighting games fun? And I actually approach this in a slightly different way, which is what is the fastest way to get my friends to understand why fighting games are fun? As I mentioned before, growing up, I was the fighting game guy amongst my friend group, and I suspect many of you here may have also had a similar issue where you were trying to go through and get friends excited about a new hobby or a new genre or some other miscellaneous thing you're really interested in. And so I was always finding myself in a position where I was trying to convince my friends why this thing would ultimately be worth their time. And altruistically, that's in part because I wanted my friends to be able to experience this thing I really enjoyed. But selfishly, I also wanted more people to be able to play fighting games with. So this was really meaningful to me for years of my life. I was going through and trying engaging with different types of people, with different types of experiences and different problems to see if I could find a way to sell them on the idea of fighting games. And I realized that a lot of the techniques that I had employed organically over the years were really useful for us philosophically when we approached this journey for Skullgirls Mobile. So the three simple steps that I kind of gleaned in order to help kind of find the fun in fighting games for people. First off, learn how to reliably execute a handful of key actions. Handful is particularly important here, especially nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Game move lists are 100 plus.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
really
Agreed.
so they have a core set of things that they can do reliably, so they can develop that aptitude.
I feel like it's probably the biggest hurdle, honestly.
They can ultimately do, and they don't have that initial hurdle of feeling impotent as they try to go through and perform various actions and fail and struggle. And if they are struggling all the time, they're more likely to churn or go through and just give up and move on to something else. Learning when and when not to use each action effectively. These things seem simple, but these could be things like, hey, that fireball, you should probably use it from full screen when you're really far away as opposed to when you're right next to your opponent. Just simple things like that that indicate like, oh, some moves are better in different locations, so positioning is really important. Or this is a counter when someone's jumping in or whatever it may be.
Counter.
Kind of plant those seeds in their brains so they start to develop the techniques or the understanding necessary for them to build their own internal model of what the game is and how it works. And then blending those skills together to reliably deliver the most damage in the most interesting way possible. Reliability speaks to confidence. We talked about that already. Most damage is important because ideally if there are moves that are actually effective in doing damage, there's a chance that they'll win, which is obviously a pretty good positive bit of reinforcement. And most interesting is really important too. Some people may just want to go through and play one particular character. There's one weird move that they really love and they really want to build their entire strategy around that. Just lean into whatever it is that they dig. And hopefully that interest and excitement of developing aptitude with the thing that they love will help overcome that inevitable learning curve that they're going to face either way. And obviously all this is bolstered if you can have a community of some sort.
That's us. That's us, guys. That's us.
Or a local friend group, or it could even be the game itself.
That's SG Molly Twitter.
That help kind of encourage you along the way. This is all part of being that cool teacher for your genre. So in Skullgirls Mobile, I'm going to go over a few things here. There's going to be a lot of text on this slide, but I'll come back to it, I promise. No need to jot it down. Our strategy was basically dream big, don't be shy about what you want to go through and build. Intuitively teach people how. This is kind of reliably executing stuff. And then intuitively teaching people when. And we'll go through each of these things in detail. So dream big is really just kind of like a broad ethos statement. I think one of the big issues that a lot of quote-unquote ports make is that they oversimplify, which is obviously smart in moderation, but oftentimes the pendulum swings two-way and you find that kind of your pantry is bare and you don't have enough ingredients to go through and build the actual thing that you were hoping to go through and capture in the first place. You need to remember that you're trying to capture the magic in general. In fighting games, that's kind of mastery, creativity, discovery, self-expression. So you need to be careful and selective, but maintain your ambitions. Don't be shy. So this is a big part of like don't port, but reimagine.
Which I have to say, like, the incredible job that Hidden Variable has done to recreate that same feeling of playing Skullgirls on mobile has been pretty damn good. Like, from my time playing Skullgirls Mobile, like, he definitely follows the path of dreaming big and recapturing those ingredients and that magic of like freedom of expression of combos, which will be explained later on in the video. But like, yeah, no, that is perfectly aligned to the goal, and they really nailed it, which is why it's like one of the most selling mobile games out there for fighters.
So going into the how, this is how people actually go through and execute stuff in your game. When I think of teaching people how, my brain goes back to the original fighting game, the one that kind of started it all, Street Fighter 2. So way back in the day, there's this notion of, as I mentioned, of determining what those key actions are for people to learn. In Street Fighter 2 and in old arcade games, they had the benefit of literally printing the inputs for key moves on the cabinet itself. Obviously, easier to do when there's 8 characters and only a handful of moves per character. But what it did is it really helped illustrate what was and wasn't important. And especially, again, with modern fighting games with hundreds of moves, that can be really daunting. So figuring out exactly what the core set is, that's really important. But then it comes down to reliably mastering inputs, which then introduces another kind of puzzle to this. So special moves in particular. We all are probably familiar with the classic quarter circle forward, the fireball motion. This is it's an interesting, kind of weird, different input, but it's pretty natural when you go through and try it. The joystick rolls forward, you're kind of emulating the actual action that like Ken and Ryu are performing when you do the fireball, and it's pretty straightforward. You've tried a few times and you generally are able to go through and figure it out. On the other hand, there's the Dragon Punch. The Dragon Punch is super weird.
Dragon Punch, the newbie killer.
You hit forward, and then you hit down, and then you like rest somewhere in between, and like it kind of doesn't feel
at least it's not the KOF inputs.
Unconventional and weird, like humans aren't supposed to be doing this thing, I must be doing something wrong. And this helps illustrate a key distinction between two different types of players. There are some players that love this little mechanical puzzle box. They love the challenge of a really interesting and distinct and challenging input that they can fail at a bunch and eventually learn and then be able to demonstrate their mastery on the fly.
Hey, Juju.
This is a big part of why they love fighting games for a lot.
Look, we're rewatching this panel that you probably were at and watching a second time.
This just reinforces all of those things.
Yo, you know what? Hang on. I did not see these these memes at the bottom. Holy shit. I was just sitting from somewhere. You know what's funny? I did not see these memes. Now I'm watching this for a second time. Given when I watched this, it was like 11:30, almost 1 a.m. At night, and I didn't see these, but that's hilarious.
I don't know why it's not working. I feel like an idiot. This game isn't for me. It just leans into everything, all the preconceptions that they had thus far. So, for those folks, for Street Fighter, I would just say, you know what? Jumping heavy kick is awesome. You should use a lot of jumping heavy kicks. One button gets screwed up, and it's fine to go
fair.
On really
pretty fair.
As well. So making sure the players walk away with.
You were sitting in front somewhere? Nice.
So
dope.
You start to reliably even start to think about tactics and other miscellaneous stuff that you would want them to do to be able to really appreciate the game. So in Skullgirls Mobile, one of our philosophies was we wanted to make sure that players would be able to instantly master the core inputs. They should be able to pick up the device without any tutorials and just kind of bang around and generally be able to discover most of the things you could ultimately do. And so everything in the game is one gesture away. You can see here we have a tap input, 4 different swipe directions that each do different things, a 2-finger swipe and a 2-finger hold, and then these special moves and blockbusters, which we'll talk about at length as we're going throughout here. So I'll show Peacock doing some of these inputs really quickly here. So just doing a quick tap combo here, then swiping up to do a launcher. You can then do a juggle after that, which we'll talk about later. Swipe down to trip, swipe back to dash backwards, swipe forward to dash forward, and then do an attack. Hold 2 fingers to block, and then swipe with 2 fingers to throw, which is also how you counter a block, so that's pretty convenient. And then there's a charge attack, which you can use to bust open people's block, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
All these things are things that if we are at a trade show or something, we just put a device in front of someone, they'll generally stumble across most of these things, which is pretty cool. You have a general sense of what the kit is, even without having to go through and consult a move list. And that's a good start, but there was a lot of other stuff we also needed to do under the hood in order to make sure that that experience was as gratifying as possible, which gets us to input queuing. So,
yes, this was a big thing.
If you were doing a fireball, like I mentioned before, you do a quarter circle forward, and then there's an input window where you're supposed to input punch. And if you input it in the right time, you'll go through and fire off the fireball. If it's too late, you'll finish your input and then just randomly punch the air, and it's not what you wanted. If you do it too early, it might just be ignored entirely and nothing ultimately happens. So the timing of an input window is part of the mastery curve in a traditional fighting game, which is fine, but it can make it really hard to reliably execute actions. So in classic fighting games, one of the things that they do, especially more modern fighting games, is they do buffering. So if you tap your punch a little bit too early, they'll say like, okay, we know what you were trying to do. We'll hold on to that, and then the next available frame will apply the punch, and you can go through to your fireball, which is good. But they usually only apply it in specific instances like that, where there's kind of a predicted input. In Skullgirls Mobile, we wanted to take it to the next level. And so basically, input queuing in Skullgirls Mobile is infinite buffering. When you're doing anything in the game, you can queue up any other action that you would otherwise want to perform.
So when I was watching this the first time around, when he was talking about infinite buffering, I had initially thought like, wait a minute. So does that mean you kind of can like play this like WoW in a sense, like you can queue up other actions before it comes out? But you know, he later on describes it more in detail, which I won't say here. But no, I had the initial thought. It's like, oh, like wow, it's actually not. But you know, the idea of this is like, oh, interesting. Taking that idea of like inputting different movesets or different moves and movesets where you can input it. It's kind of like, for those who play fighting games. Also, my subtitles went away. Give me 1 second. Oh, there it goes. It's I think if I were to describe like a good example of this idea, is for people who play fighting games who know this, negative edging, which is basically means like if you input a motion or a move, but you hold the button down, the move won't come out until you release the button. So kind of like how what was it? Kind of how like most players in Marvel 3 that play Zero, and or you know, any move in Skullgirls, you can do that as well. You heard that concept? Yeah. So it's a good idea to definitely use that concept and put it into SG Mobile, because then it's like, oh hey, I can do that. Do that a lot as well. I would not know personally, but it sounds right. It sounds it would be. Yeah, I believe so. I can only speak to my experience with Marvel 3 and SG regarding negative edging. Also in Street Fighter 4, I believe as well. I want to say that's also where it happens. Negative edging is really in a lot of fighting games. So yeah, it is definitely a good concept to definitely copy, and definitely it was definitely good use in SG Mobile.
Which basically frees you up to be able to start to establish a queue of different actions that you want to perform, which is kind of the baseline of what our combo system is built on, which reflects this. We'll see in the next slide. When you actually have a blockbuster queued up, you'll actually see a little highlight ring around it that helps visually indicate, hey, this is going to fire off the next moment that you have an active frame. And this reinforces our core goals of making choices is more important than executing choices. We want to remove
True, very true.
That otherwise prevents people from engaging with what makes fighting games so fun. On top of that, we had a bunch of handicaps just by virtue of being on mobile. In particular, we needed to have a longer input detection window because all inputs are being funneled to the touch screen. So when you tap the screen, we don't know if you're going to be doing a tap and release, a tap and hold, a swipe. You just started and you're thinking about it. Maybe you're uncertain when you started the tap. So we need just a little bit more time in order to be able to detect whatever those gestures ultimately are. So longer input windows are helpful in that regard. Also, we don't know what kind of device you have. If you're playing on like a min-spec
Yeah.
you're probably going to
It's a good idea. They're gonna think about that too.
Issues or other things, we wanted to make sure we were casting kind of the widest net. And then because we knew we were engaging with brand new players to fighting games, this classic loop of interpreting what you're seeing, deciding what you want to do, and then actually going through and doing it could take a little bit longer. So all of these things glean benefits from ultimately having a larger input window across the board by virtue of queuing. So to show a quick example of how this ultimately works, you can see the inputs over here on the right side. We're going to show a peacock combo that you would do in Skullgirls Mobile. So she's going to dash in, do a tap combo, launch her into a juggle, queue up one blockbuster, and then do another blockbuster, and boom, she just hit a 42-hit combo. So we're just going to go through it in slow-mo. She dashes in, does her combo, does a launcher, and then taps once. And when she does, she's going to go into this juggle in midair. And this is a canned juggle combo. And what this does is it means that you can actually, once you've launched someone and started a juggle, you can kind of proverbially put down the phone and just step back. You can look down at your block button, see what you have available, start to tactically engage. It gives you time and space to be able to actually engage that part of your brain as opposed to just reacting to whatever's going on in the game itself, which then lets you go through and queue up, as we saw. There we go. With the slow-mo sound effects. Queue up the blockbuster, and then during super flash, that little time stop thing, she queues up the next one, which creates this combo. Now, this 42-hit combo is pretty cool, but it's a great example of something that a lot of players would say, that's pretty neat, but there's no way I could ever do that combo. What's great is in Skullgirls Mobile, this is something a beginner or intermediate player can learn how to go through and do. We teach people this combo at trade shows, people who are anxious to even pick up the controller because fighting games aren't for them. We walk them through things, and you can watch their eyes light up when they realize they're playing like a fighting game pro. They didn't even realize it. And this is really empowering for people and speaks to the wish fulfillment. Find the right ways in which you can unlock that stuff for people. And if you compare the complexity of inputting this in mobile to the console game, you can see it's pretty disparate. And this is just kind of scratching the surface. On the console game, you need to understand how that medium punch works after you've dashed forward twice. Or
let me just double check some. Hang on. Dash forward, medium punch, light punch, light kick, medium kick, then jump, hard punch, and then quarter circle back, punch, then super. Oh, okay. I know exactly what this combo is. Okay, I'm just like visualizing in my head. It's like, how does this look like? It's like, oh, okay, this is like your very basic Beowulf B&B. All right, move on.
That those three moves are going to combo together in a ground string or in the juggle. You need to successfully do the quarter circle back and punch and the quarter circle forward to make sure you hit punches at the same time and they're not slightly staggered. There's a lot of mechanical understanding and execution, as well as like a general awareness of kind of the core systems to even enable you to enact something like this. So this again just kind of speaks to this notion of don't port, reimagine, find a different path to go through and achieve the same results. So even though those are kind of your basic bread and butter normals and things you can go through and do in a fighting game, we did want to give you access to a broader set of moves.
Cool.
Specials and supers. They're called specials and supers for a reason. They're pretty cool. And so we wanted to make sure that as much of your moveset in a fighting game that you would have can be accessible to people so that every character didn't feel kind of one-to-one cookie-cutter versions of each other. So I'm going to show a early prototype that we did very early on that demonstrated a way in which we might be able to do this. We started basically using what Injustice had at the time. So we'll watch a little video here. Ignore it's an early prototype, so you'll see lots of weird sliding around and all sorts of nonsense. But as you look here on the bottom of the screen, you'll see a blockbuster meter that is basically filling up as you take an
this is wild.
Standard for how fighting game meters ultimately work. And you would unlock the Blockbuster 1 once you've done enough stuff, which would fire off one move. Blockbuster 2, which is more powerful. Blockbuster 3, you get the idea. We added this little fist icon on the left side, which is basically an equipable special move. So something you can kind of customize to give yourself a little bit more modularity. And this was, again, just a baseline, just to kind of see how
Whoa, what just happened there?
Stuff that Skullgirls ultimately had kind of built in. Like
Band teleported the other side.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, we felt like it didn't do it for us. And so we knew we needed to go through and prototype a bunch of other solutions. So we're going to go through a handful of those.
Okay, hang on.
Some of the stuff that we were kicking around.
Okay, I have to ask Zug when he gets back, but I have to ask him about that idea. Like, what was that? I've never seen that before. That was wild. Was Cerebell, like, did you have to, like, basically tap the screen to fill up that meter, or actually, I'm not sure you can answer. Well, I'll ask Zug next time he's in here. But yeah, that was wild. That was when I saw that the first time around. I was like, what the fuck was that? Oh, you're in here. Were something that had an injustice. Okay. What was the idea for that, for Cerebella? What was the action you had to do? Did you have to tap the screen, or did you have to, like, input the motion, like swiping your finger upwards? Like, what exactly was that idea in mind? Also, for those people watching the VOD, you missed out. Anyways, I'll wait here until the response happens. But that's yeah, that was wild. The first time I watched this. Basically, the idea was every blockbuster had a mini game that gave you a twitchy action you needed to perform to maximize damage. Oh wow, that's actually wild. But that's wild. Actually, not thinking about it. That's crazy. Wow, damn, that's crazy. Just thinking about it, man. I can only imagine what would have been for every character in this game. But that's cool. Holy shit. And Justice was pretty vulnerable to add a bit more complexity interest since the rest of the game was so simple. Yeah. Especially an example you did show early on with Injustice being like, hey, there's RPG elements in there, but the action was not great. But in the CM, we realized that we didn't need to give everything else we were doing. Gotcha. And we'll still have them. Oh wow, really? Well, that's kind of interesting. Wow, that's wild. That's pretty wild, honestly. Yeah, that's crazy. No, maybe one day I'll probably poke your brain. So it's like, hey, what were those ideas for this for every other character, or which characters had mini games for? Like, I'll be just very curious to see which ones had what. You can you don't have to diverge it tonight, but one of these days when I'm like, hey, just when I'm like at Comic Breaker or Evo or whatever, what have you. But yeah, that's so wild though. This early version stuff's really cool.
The principles that we were looking at were basically how each of these methods of accessing your additional moves and whatnot graded on these 4 topics. So moveset breadth, we wanted to give you as much access to the broadest array of moves as possible. We wanted to make sure it was easy to grok, especially for a brand new player. We wanted to make sure it celebrated meter because that's an important concept that's relatable to core fighting game players, but also is a really important concept we want to teach new players. Meter is a really powerful element there. And also make sure that we do all that stuff without a ton of HUD clutter. We don't want it to look like a World of Warcraft screenshot. So this version we're just looking at we'll call MVP for now. We thought it was fine. It wasn't too bad. Didn't have the moveset breadth we were looking for, but ultimately was like a good starting point. And so why not? Let's just go through and slap another special move in there. And we felt like, cool, well, that gives you another thing that you can do. But now that button is starting to encroach upon the play space. It's actually limiting the amount of space that you have to do taps and swipes and starting to introduce a little bit more clutter. So it felt like it was a half step. It was kind of one step forward, one step back. So we tried to do something a little bit different, which we called Clash Points. This was inspired by Clash Royale, which was all the rage back then and is still all the rage, so congrats, Supercell. But basically the idea here was that your meter would fill up in a standard fighting game way and earn you points, and then every single special move or blockbuster, based on how powerful it was, would have a certain point value associated with it. You could just spend that meter as you go. And we're like, that seems pretty cool. It's similar-ish to Clash Royale, so that would be neat. And all moves are using the same logic. We don't have some things that are kind of having one visual style and another one that would have a different one. However, it meant you had to do a lot of meter bar math in your head, especially while playing and actually at the same time.
Yeah, very good point.
Clash Royale, you're not just kind of like sitting back and watching. You're actually doing a lot of quick things, and then you have to go through and make that assessment, which would mean that you could easily mess up multi-move combos. It's very easy to be like off by 1. You tried to do that peacock combo before, and then you missed the last input because you actually only had 3 points instead of 4, and then all of a sudden your combo fizzles, and you feel like an idiot who's not good at fighting games, and are reminded that you may not be that great at math. So that's obviously not what we wanted to do. So we took this as an interesting data point and decided to explore something a little bit different, which we called Hype Train. So special moves back to the NFL level spot again, and now you're
Hype Train, folks.
With as many blockbusters as you want. So you could have 5 blockbuster 1s, or you could have 2 blockbuster 2s and a blockbuster 1, or 1 blockbuster 3 and then 2 blockbuster 1s, and maybe put them in different orders depending on tactically what you wanted to do. And we're like, okay, this is kind of cool. There's some interesting tactical choices here that are neat. But the biggest issue with this was the more powerful stuff you equip, the less stuff you would actually have on your meter. And that's an interesting choice, but part of the goal here is we want to give you as much accessibility to all the interesting stuff you could do as a player. So this was interesting, but didn't quite do the trick for us. That led us to what we affectionately called Mr. Buckets, which is informed, of course, by the original racing Chase the Bucket.
Mr. Bucket.
No imitations, I suppose. And in Mr. Buckets, every single move basically had their own meter. So the meter and button was all in one. Special moves and blockbusters are using the same kind of visual logic. So we had a lot of different modularity there. You didn't have to do any math, which is pretty cool. But there was some, we missed the fact that special moves had cooldown and blockbusters had meter. One of the early explorations, that original Fist prototype, special moves would basically just have their own natural cooldown. So that led to a sequel to Mr. Buckets, affectionately Ms. Buckets, which we all love. And basically in this, special moves now have cooldown, which is pretty cool. Now that we have that tactical interest as well as the general bucket system, which is cool. But they all kind of look the same despite having different fill logic, which is pretty weird, which then led us to the patriarch of the Buckets family, Uncle Buckets. And Uncle Buckets for us was the best of all worlds. So we had different shapes of special moves and blockbusters to indicate that they filled differently. We were able to squeeze in 5 different moves and remove that kind of special move that was lurking on the left side that was creating a little bit more clutter, which was really neat. And now, you can see all the sliders aren't pushed to the right. This isn't like a perfect solution, but it was the best solution for us. We felt like this ultimately prioritized and was able to deliver on all the key things that were most critical for us. and it freed up some of this HUD space that we had, which was pretty cool. So this got the
Hey,
quality.
nice.
It's very similar to the UI that we have in the game right now. Well, again, freeing up
Dope,
space
dope,
for
dope.
character abilities. What are character abilities, you might say? Thank you for saying that, because it's a great segue to my next slide, which is selective complexity. So one thing that's pretty common in fighting games is that every single individual character will have their own kind of unique mechanics, something that makes
Also, nice misfortune drawing there, by the way. Whoever did that was great.
And, that's cool. In traditional fighting games, it gives you a unique set of tools to learn, and every character's journey is its own kind of path to mastery, which is really cool. But we debated pretty heavily, even if we wanted to consider including stuff like this, because it adds a lot of complexity. So we're going to use one example for this, which is a puppet character. So a puppet character in a fighting game basically is someone that has a little minion that you're able to control independently. So basically, if you're playing a puppet character, you're kind of playing two characters at once, which is pretty complicated in a fighting game period, let alone on a mobile fighting game, so you understand why we might be squeamish. In Skullgirls, our puppet character is Misfortune. She was dismembered, which is unfortunate, but fortunately she had swallowed a life gem, and so she's okay, and she can take off her head and throw it at people and do all sorts of stuff, which is pretty cool.
Good, good. He knows the lore.
With a lot of different ways of how we would implement this puppet mechanic in Skullgirls Mobile, including the first one, which we called Ice Climbers, which is basically her head would come off, and then anytime you would perform an action with her, the head would just do something along with it, and that was fine. She was doing some things, but it didn't really feel intentional. It didn't really feel like we were getting as much value out of it as we otherwise could. So we ended up adding, generally don't like adding HUD elements, but we added this special little paw UI that would appear, so you could basically roll your head and then be able to provide specific inputs for your head while still tapping and swiping on the main screen to perform different actions. So you can see a little bit of an example of Misfortune removing her head, doing a standard combo with her body as her head's chilling on the ground. You can see little highlights on the left side as you do different actions to kind of pick them up off the ground and allow you to do crazy combos. Now, not every player, just like the other
Just for a second here, like, when I first played Skullgirls Mobile, like, just off the bat, when I was playing with some of the characters, specifically Big Ben, because I played Big Ben in Second Encore, and the moment where like he does jumping like kick, but he's so low to the ground, like blew my mind for no reason. I was like, what is happening? Why is this on the ground? This is wild to me. And seeing some other moves that I saw from other characters, I was like, what the hell is going on? But it was really cool, actually. Honestly, it was really sick to see.
Combos I showed you before are going to be doing these combos. Some players may just play with their head on the entire time, or the head will come off kind of accidentally, and then it just becomes a weird random variable that they're playing with while they're playing. But ultimately, knowing that there is this kind of aspirational complexity that they can build towards if they're so inclined was really important in order to go through and satisfy a wide array of different players and help casual players become more advanced and proficient fighting game fans. So this is an example. I mentioned the question in essential genre features, and I often talk about cutting stuff. This is an example of a thing we thought we were going to cut that we ended up realizing, actually, this is a lot more important than we thought it was. Combo expression is a super important part of this. This is kind of what I've been alluding to earlier on with the magic of fighting games. And this effectively speaks to this notion of kind of creativity when you're going through and building a combo on the fly, reading what your opponent's doing, reading the scenario that you're currently in. So this is really important for us to kind of capture the magic of what makes a fighting game special. And there's a lot of components to combo expression that ultimately, fulfills whatever that particular desire was. So visual variety is important. Here's an example from Contest of Champions, which I love contests, spend many, many, many hours in contest. But as you can see, all the characters in contest are ground bound, and they have basically one combo string that's mixed up with supers and whatnot, but it gets pretty repetitive over time, especially the matches sometimes last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so it can get a little bit, again, repetitive. So we really wanted each Skullgirls fight to be able to look different than the last one. Tactical choices were really important. We wanted to make sure the game had enough depth so you had meaningful reasons to go through and be doing different things. And then having creative agency. So this, again, is kind of part of the core of one of the things that makes fighting games, especially at that intermediate level of play, really special and start to come into their own. You're kind of reacting to different circumstances on the fly. And, in many ways, fighting games can be a lot like kind of like a physics game. So we'll see in this video here with Umbrella, she's created a bubble, and then she's going to toss someone, knock them off the wall, into the bubble, which will create a puddle. When they hit the puddle, they bounce into the air, just like in real life. And then you catch them with a throw, and then she goes through and maybe puts them into a bubble, then busts that, which creates another puddle, which yada, yada, yada. There's all sorts of different toy-like things that
This is pretty wild.
doing. And a lot of people wouldn't realize that these things exist in fighting games. This is a big...
Also, side note, if that happened in Second Encore, where the puddle on hit, like, ground bounces a character, I'll be kind of mad, honestly. I'll be like, this character is already broken. Please don't give her any more tools.
Part of once you've kind of mastered the exactly how the game works, it kind of opens up this sandbox-like thing that really starts to allow you to feel like you're expressing yourself in a fun and interesting way, and you feel responsible. You have agency and creativity about what those particular choices are. So this was obviously a really important thing for us. Another avenue of this that demonstrates it is this notion of a combo video. Combo videos are usually assembled by players that
Hell yeah.
you know, their creativity and skill. We had one of our pillars that our game needs to be able to support combo videos. So
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I agree.
So that a bunch of people, if we said, go make a really cool Black Dahlia combo, we're going to get a dozen different examples back that are all totally different from each other. And here's an example of a Black Dahlia combo video to give you a sense, where the player is basically they've got a very specific loadout of the different moves that they've chosen. They're using her character ability, which is firing this gun that she has. They're going to use moves to kind of create space and then close space, using a blockbuster here that's introducing an environmental hazard. I certainly hope nothing bad happens with all that oil on the ground and her fire shot, and lo and behold.
Nice.
So all sorts of really cool, interesting things that players are able to go through and demonstrate.
Nice.
And even if, you know, I may not be able to execute this combo myself, knowing that these types of combos can occur speaks to the ceiling.
I agree. Agreed, G2. Agreed. That's pretty wild.
Something more for you to go through and learn. So that's a lot of stuff I know, but all that kind of speaks to helping to
Now SG Mobile just can feel like gods when they do touch of death kills.
So intuitively teaching when and not to use detection effectively. You know, one way of looking at this is kind of revealing this puzzle of when is a good time to use a move and why, and when is a bad time to use a move and why. We talked about this before with a fireball. Better to use it at long range than close range, for example. And this is in part to help encourage accountability for players. Players are always going to make bad decisions, but hopefully if they understand why, then it can start to feed into whatever their internal model is that will enable them to start to learn. And they'll be able to say, ooh, got it,
I got it. You know what?
Hopefully they're blaming themselves.
Do you have them archived somewhere? Because I would love to like understanding Baggett's pain. Do you have like those videos somewhere archived? Because I'd love to like kind of watch all the combo videos that mobile has and just kind of get blown away on stream, like I did for World's Finest when I was getting combo entries for some characters for second encore. There's a lot. Okay, all right, cool. I will definitely check them out. Like I will do it on stream. That sounds wild to me. And then again, like SG Mobile is a wild game, so saving this slide. But when I see anyone talking about fighting game accessibility, when is a good time to use X? Why? When is a bad time to use X? Why? Understanding bad accountability. Yeah. Yeah. This is actually pretty good. Go ahead and take that photo. I'm pretty sure you've done it already, but yeah. This is great.
Not the game. I mean, they're players, so they're always going to blame us. They're always going to blame the game. But eventually, hopefully, somewhere deep in the back of their mind, there's a part of them that's ultimately thinking, oh, actually, I think I know what I could do next time. And there's a lot of stuff that might seem obvious that needs to be kind of implicitly taught along the way. So, for example, in fighting games, there's this notion of blocking and punishing. Simply, an opponent will attack you, you will block, hopefully successfully. Until they're done, they can't do any more attacks. Now it's your turn to go through and try and do a counterattack of your own. And that creates this your turn, my turn, ebb and flow that is pretty common to the general flow of fighting games. One famous example of this is...
Let's go, Justin!
More complicated. These are like perfect parries in a high-stakes environment in the middle of that person's super, and then doing an amazing punish to be able to go through and win the match. We obviously aren't expecting players to do that in Skullgirls Mobile, but for example, here I'll have this video running as I talk through some of the obstacles that people face. We create this massive window after someone has done a really powerful attack that will enable the player to be able to punish it a lot more easily. But even doing that, there was a lot of little things that we needed to do along the way to make this moment feel viable, to get the sense that players are really internalizing the notion of what blocking and punishing actually is. So one common complaint that you'll hear when people are playing fighting games is, you told me to block and I blocked, but why didn't it work? And usually that's because fighting games have high and low attacks. And they may have been blocking perfectly fine and they got hit with a low that all of a sudden opened them up and they were in the middle of a combo. It may have even looked kind of like a high, but was actually a low. And that's just the thing that you learn, and that's like a big part of fighting games in general. So one of the things we did in Skullgirls Mobile is we removed high and low block. When you're blocking, you block anything that's coming your way. We'll pop up and down between high and low, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. When is it
smart move.
Sometimes people think a person's combo's over, but it's not. There's actually one more move, and they let up a little bit too early, and then they get punished, and they don't understand why. They don't realize, oh, shoot, I should have waited a little bit longer. They just feel like something happened and the game wasn't working the way they expected it to. So one of the things we do in Skullgirls Mobile is that we extend your block stun. We basically hold you in that little turtle shell as long as possible until we know it's safe for you to come out, and that allows you to kind of have that space to be able to plan whatever your counter is ultimately going to be. Then when you try to counter, oftentimes they're like, I tried to punish, but I got interrupted. Or why can't I punish with certain moves? That's usually because the startup on that move is too slow. You need to make sure you're using a really fast move in order to be able to ensure you can punish your opponent while they're vulnerable. In Skullgirls Mobile, we make it so your tap attack, the easiest attack, the most basic thing you can do, is the fastest move that you have, and we actually add a little magnetic pull to nudge you towards the opponent, just to remove as many possible obstacles that would prevent you from being able to successfully connect and start a combo of your own. So these are all just little things that we do under the hood to kind of teach these core concepts. And then another aspect of teaching this stuff the burden is felt by the AI. So as a predominantly PvE game, we need to lean really heavily on our AI as a teaching tool. No one likes to be in a tutorial, so the more ways in which we can organically encourage players to learn some of these concepts, the better. So we have what we call the sparring partner AI, which is a very dutiful, friendly sparring partner who basically just does stupid stuff and allows you to go through and punish them, obviously. So we'll watch this pain wheel up here in the corner. She's going to go through and make a very unwise decision of doing a charge attack from afar, which has this massive recovery window, which makes it really easy for Umbrella to punish her. She punishes her from full screen, but she probably could even dash in and go through and interrupt her instead. So the AI basically creates these massive, obvious openings, especially at lower AI levels. And what that does is maybe even the first time you're like, oh, I could have punished that, and you didn't, but at least you know, like, okay, I know what to look out for next time. And people are starting to condition these reads that they would otherwise have, which will become more valuable to them as they spend more time with the game and start to pick up on those overall concepts. So, AI exists in to do a lot of different things in games, but first and foremost, it's there to help the player have fun. And so even though it is, obviously, higher level AI can be a challenging test, it's important that the AI is helpful to make players feel clever and be able to learn basically how your game works. One of the other things that we do in Skullgirls Mobile is, because we're an RPG, we're able to lean on our RPG features to help people learn more complex techniques from fighting games. So in Skullgirls Mobile, every single palette for a character, every color, is basically its own unique character. They have their own signature ability, which makes...
I have to say, this is probably one of the smartest things Hidden Variable has done to for when the game come out, because instead of just 14, 15 characters that is in Second Encore, you have like hundreds of characters now in the game because of the different abilities for each ult, and that's actually very smart. The grind never ends at all.
It means it encourages a certain offensive play style or how you're supposed to play them on defense. So, for example, Robofortune, who you saw earlier, she actually has 13 different variants in the game, all of which have slightly different properties. And we're going to focus a little bit real quick for this example on Blue Screen, one of the Robofortunes.
I have to say, what I'm very curious if Zug was like, oh, you know what? Let's I'm pretty sure it's not, but it'd be funny if it was actually the truth. Like, the reason why Zug chose this palette to show on during GDC, so it's like, oh, Zug likes doing this because he's secretly a brony one time, and he did this because it was a reference to a brony thing. Yeah. That's just my what do you call it? I won't say mind theory, but there's a term for it. Headcanon. Yeah, it's just my headcanon for why the reason is. I'm pretty sure it's for a whole different reason, but yeah. Oh, you didn't know? Oh man. It was before your time, Juju. It's a My Little Pony reference, but it's a reference to a web series that took My Little Pony characters and somebody animated them like in different art styles and like made this like kind of very like horrific like story to them. Yeah, it's still cool. I believe it's still up on YouTube. You can check it out. Maybe I'll show you the link later on. But no, this is a reference to that actual like web series of My Little Pony. But also, yes, you can also say My Little Pony as well at the same time. That's my theory. I could be wrong on this entire thing. I'm just like thinking about it too hard, but that I believe is the reference.
So as you can see here, she has this particular ability: gain armor every 5 seconds. The armor will be removed when knocked down. So in Skullgirls Mobile, armor basically reduces your damage taken by 20%. So if Robofortune has not been knocked down in 25 seconds, she's basically going to be invulnerable. So you can't just keep mashing buttons and kind of doing your standard combos. You need to find a way to go through and knock her down in order to open her up. So that basically encourages a slightly different tactical choice. So we'll see this example here with Sarabella. She goes for an attempt to attack Robo Fortune to no avail. You'll see all the 0 damage popping off her. She does a launcher, but doesn't do a juggle, just lets her hit the ground in order to remove all the armor, and then immediately tries to jump in and do as much damage to her as possible before she ultimately gets up. What we've done there is we're encouraging a nuanced strategy, which in a traditional fighting game is called okizeme, which is basically wake-up techniques. So a lot of fighting games, you have a set of tools that you use when you're in neutral, and two characters have the full array of options at their disposal. When you've knocked someone down, you technically have an advantage that you can press as an offensive player. So learning how to go through and connect with someone or damage them right when they're getting up is an important concept that a lot of people lab and strategize when they're playing a core fighting game. And in Skullgirls Mobile, we use these RPG systems to just indirectly teach people. The nature of this RPG feature indirectly teaches you this concept, and you may not even realize it internally until you.
So when I realized what Mighty Zug was talking about, specifically in this moment cemented to me like, wait a minute. This entire time, Skullgirls RPG Mobile is unconsciously like teaching many mobile players how to play a fighting game, and this may spawn more players SG Mobile that may also come across the second encore at some point. So seriously, this is all in an effort to get more players to play Skullgirls either way, and possibly convert to actually playing in second encore, which is pretty genius. It's pretty awesome.
Actually go and then play a fighting game, a console fighting game at a later period in time. So this helps demand new habits and prompts experimentation as well, which also keeps the game varied. So you can't just use the exact same technique and the exact same combo against different people. So I've talked a lot about what we've gone through and added to the game. We'll talk a little bit now about some of the stuff we decided to not keep within the game. This is the final section. So addition by subtraction, it is GDC. I'm sure this year and in years past, you've all seen talks that speak to the importance of less is more. Cheap perfection.
Very true. Very true.
But when there's nothing left to take away, which resonates to this day. In fact, you'll often hear modern philosophers say the same thing in their own unique way. But for us, it's really, again, about figuring out what is and isn't essential for your genre. Anything that isn't can actually create clutter and friction and ultimately prevent people from being able to properly understand and appreciate whatever it is that is most singularly special about your game. In Skullgirls Mobile, the key examples we're going to talk about, just a few of many, are jumping, high and low blocking, and real-time PvP. So, jumping. Why is jumping important? Well, it's basically the foundation of the approach strategy for every fighting game since Street Fighter 2. So probably makes sense to go through and have jumping in your game. It also, having a ground game and an air game basically helps create visual variety and tactical variety, so it makes a lot of sense as to why you would want to have jumping in your game. We also were just worried that if we didn't have jumping, maybe our game would feel shallow or bland. There's all these kind of general concerns. We don't want to fall into that mobile game stereotype. However, even though jumping adds a lot, it also adds a lot of headaches. So there's this notion of cross-ups. When you're jumping at someone, you can jump over them and land on the other side. That is a really interesting, tricky scenario in a classic fighting game. It means all your inputs get flipped. You need to be holding a different direction to block. You need to, your quarter circle back is now a quarter circle forward. You need to go through and perform different actions. And for newer players, that can be really confusing. If you've ever watched someone playing a fighting game for the first time and they're in a mirror match against the exact same opponent, you'll often see them have moments where they say, wait a minute, which one am I? And they're kind of looking around and trying to figure out what exactly it is they're doing. So there's a benefit to just having this, hey, this side of the screen is your stuff, that side of the screen is their stuff. You don't need to worry about anything else. So not having jumping in Skullgirls Mobile actually unlocked a lot of things for us that made the kind of mental stack a lot more palatable for people. In addition, given that we have touch inputs, it's actually kind of mechanically awkward to go through and do a jump forward or a jump back. If you look on the right side, this is basically the input arc that you have for when you're doing swipes within the game. If we had to have jump forward and jump back, all of a sudden you have to subdivide into narrower chunks. Gestures are kind of loosey-goosey enough as it is. So if you introduce that, all of a sudden you might have someone trying to do a launcher and they end up jumping instead.
Not to mention you're saving a lot of like finger pains, because I played some games where you had to swipe like to jump, and like my index finger was red by the end of the day from like trying to get it to work. So it's like, oh, there's gotta be a better way.
Which all of a sudden immediately breaks down their sense of understanding and trust that the actual core mechanics will be reliable enough for them. So adding this new functionality would come at a pretty significant cost. And we realized that jumping wasn't as essential for us. Verticality actually was. And there's a lot of interesting ways in which you can achieve verticality even without just a dedicated jump input. So in this fight, Annie's going through and doing a classic juggle, but then she cancels in the middle of that juggle into a blockbuster that she can do in the air. She does her dive kicks. She has these moves that will knock people up, and then she can go through and chase them down. She does a little dragon punch style move here, and then you can see she's occupying different spaces in the arena. You still get that sense of verticality, even though there's no dedicated input for
All right,
jumping.
sounds good, Juju.
You still capture that just using a slightly different set of tools. High and low blocking, we thought that was pretty important.
Yeah,
Because
very.
games are a pretty key offensive concept in fighting games. You can see here, Beowulf basically successfully blocking, and then all it takes is one hit that you miss, and before you know it, you're opened up and you're getting comboed into oblivion. And kind of reading your opponent's actions. This is like bread and butter fighting game stuff. You need to be able to spend enough time fighting enough characters, understanding what their tricky moves are, and making sure that you kind of are passing each individual test moment to moment. But at the end of the day, as we kind of talked about a little bit before, having a block as a reliable panic input significantly reduces the learning curve. Players, when they're holding down block, you're literally holding down both thumbs and like gripping the phone tightly. That is a really intuitive thing for people to go through and do, and just knowing I'm safe, I've successfully blocked, I'm safe. The only thing that someone can do when I'm blocking is a throw, and the best way to counter a throw is you do a throw of your own, which is just a swipe from that two-finger hold that you have. That's an intuitive concept that you can teach people relatively easily. And you don't actually lose all that much by not having the high-low block. It also looks pretty cool. You go through and see your character kind of like hopping up and down and blocking everything that's coming your way. It's very much kind of like a Neo Matrix kind of deal that's going on. But then at the same time, because we had all these high-low properties, because we pulled this over from the original console game, there's kind of nuances that still kind of creep in that you can use. So for example, Robo's going to do a high beam and a low beam, and Annie can actually do a sweep underneath that high beam and actually use the focus to hop over the low.
Cool.
Different characters have different tools in their kit that allow you to engage with like high-low stuff just in a more indirect way. It's just not part of like the fundamental exchange that you have when you're going into the middle of the fight. Real-time PvP, why we thought it was critical. Some people might say that without PvP, it's not even really a fighting game. So this is a pretty common refrain that we heard from people. And the general feeling behind that is that the AI alone is insufficient to go through and properly test your skills. We also, in Skullgirls, we featured rollback.
Hey, let's go.
Rollback netcode is basically a means by which you can have
Rollback, yeah.
kind of intense
In the kingdom it has.
over a poor network connection and still have it feel reliable, which is obviously really important for a fighting game. So this is an asset that we could leverage. We decided that it wasn't, in part because there's a precedent here. A lot of people play fighting games in PvE-only settings. I mean, I love playing fighting games against other people, but I've also poured hundreds of hours into fighting games, just playing against the AI and in different modes and whatnot. It's a fun experience. It's something that a lot of players ultimately do already. Obviously, accessibility, we talked about it before. When you're playing against AI opponents,
This is very important for SG Mobile for sure.
As you otherwise are when you're actually going up against another human, which helps make the game more accessible. It was more viable for us. We're a small team developing a complicated game in 2017. It was going to be really hard. So eventually we went through and added it after launch. So we still thought it was valuable, but it just wasn't essential for the core MVP experience that we were looking to build. And then again, this is not meant to be a direct port. We're trying to create a complementary experience as opposed to something that is one-to-one with what the original console game was. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that I've gone over, and I've spent a lot of time talking about Skullgirls in general, so I'm going to try and step back a little bit and hopefully abstract some of the stuff that we've talked about here in context if you're going to look and build, bring a unique genre to another platform or a new audience as well. So familiar refrain, don't port, reimagine. Again, determining whatever the essential elements are that makes your genre uniquely fun. There's a lot of things that are fun in a particular game that can also be found in other genres as well. So it's important to get specific and figure out, for us in fighting games, it was this notion of that sense of creativity that you have, reacting to various circumstances, building your own combo, all those different elements. That was kind of the secret sauce that we were ultimately trying to build towards and see if we could recreate. Figure out what that unique thing is that is, I can't achieve this in any other game or in any other genre, and try and use that as your North Star in order to guide you towards what it is you want to go through and build. And then you can surround it with the other mechanics that are needed to really go through and help it blossom or help players be able to get to that point so they can appreciate it properly. Again, kind of like a different path up the same mountain. It's really important to question essential genre features. All genres have seemingly essential organs. Do not be afraid to rip one out. The more sacrosanct it is, the better. You have no idea whether or not removing that thing, well, it'll probably change things quite a bit, but it might actually unlock a different perspective on what actually is or isn't important about your game. You might not realize it, but a lot of that stuff might just be kind of potential filler that is actually doing more harm than good. Also, just celebrating unique experiences. Introducing new audiences to familiar mechanics can be really powerful too. I always reference Tetris 99. Obviously, obviously we're all familiar with Battle Royale, the notion 100 enter and 1 leaves. And casual players, like Tetris players, may never have gone through and sought out that kind of experience. But when it's introduced to them in Tetris 99, all of a sudden, all these skills they've been developed, they're on the center stage, they've got the spotlight on them, they get to experience the thrill of watching their opponents drop around them as they get into top 10 and top 5, which is super cool and unique for them. And so you're able to go through and take a lot of these things that may otherwise seem alienating and bring them to new audiences. That's another avenue by which you can approach some of this stuff. So I really want to encourage people to focus on what are these elusive genre-specific experiences that people haven't effectively translated before. A lot of people, you'll hear people say, people haven't done that for a reason. That certainly came up when we were talking about properly building a fighting game for mobile. In my mind, that's basically an opportunity in the right hands. It's a puzzle for you to go through and sort out. There's a lot of upside there if you're able to find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lastly, be the cool teacher for your genre. Teach your reluctant students to help fall in love with the things that you love. I like to say that basically each player is potentially experiencing their favorite genre for the very first time. It just needs to be presented to them in the right way. And ultimately, if you're embarking on this, that burden falls to you. So, no pressure.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Hey. Good stuff. Good stuff, Mighty Zug, on an awesome panel.
Make sure to fill out your evaluation forms, I remembered. And shockingly, I think I have a little bit of time for Q&A if folks have questions. Cool. Yeah, go for it.
So, awesome talk. Thank you so much. Now,
Yes, I agree. It was a great talk.
Curious, the decision to add like the little pop-up numbers during like hits and stuff, like that's something that's exclusive to the mobile game, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about that, like what value that adds?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I didn't really touch on here is that as a mobile RPG, there's a lot of under-the-hood systems where you're actually leveling up your characters, and as they level up, they do more damage. So
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Where the playing field is leveled. One of the things that, frankly, there's versions of this talk where there's slides about this, but the fact that you can kind of grind in order to become more powerful than your opponent is another means by which you can overcome some of that potential friction in order to get more comfortable. And so as a result, we needed some way in which we could communicate, hey, you just went through and leveled up, you're now doing 15 damage instead of 10 damage and things like that. So,
Cool. Thank you.
yeah, no worries. Thank you. I should have repeated the question, but it's basically, why do we have those little numbers that are floating? So I'll do it that way.
A JQ&A, you never know what random stuff are going to bring up, and there's an expectation to be profound at all times. I feel you, Mighty Zug. The people at GDC, like, you're in a good place. It wasn't like at a PAX or at a convention where your typical fan will be. So you were in good hands in terms of these questions. So you were fine. But yeah, no, I definitely feel you.
I'm supposed to alternate. I'll get right to you. Yeah,
thanks so much. My question is about the playtesting process that you touched on just a little bit.
Yeah.
And how you balance, because you mentioned like having newer players and to consistently test with is valuable. How do you balance that against them obviously becoming less new players? Like if they're testing repeatedly for you, it's not going to be the completely new player experience each time. How do you kind of work around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways that's a boon. There is a value in quote unquote Kleenex testing, where you're basically always testing brand new people every single time. But if you're able to have some folks that are persistent members of your core group, you can basically see how they evolve over time and whether or not they're actually picking up on stuff. If they haven't played your game in a month, when they come back, is it a complete clean slate and nothing sticks? Are they able to pick it up again based on the different choices that you made? So I think it's just always valuable to go through and have a variety of perspectives. You just kind of put them in a different cohort, so to speak, and just kind of take that feedback based on that.
Yeah.
And I did not repeat that question. It was basically but yeah, go for it.
Thank you very much. It was a very inspirational talk. My question is, how to not over-optimize to responding to players' intent rather than the players' actual input? What to look out for, not to.
So the question is, to paraphrase, how to balance, I guess the distinction between what players want to do and how easy we want to make that versus, maybe oversimplifying the techniques that we ultimately employ to enable them to execute that stuff. Is that?
I guess more like, because there were a lot in the talk that mentioned a lot of systems that would detect the player's input,
right?
More broadly, detect the player's intended input and sort of prioritize that over their actual input to make sure that what they intended to do would stick.
This was actually what probably one of the questions I think was most interesting because I've been hearing a lot about this as of late from like Maximilian and other FGC content creators. Not as of late, but like had these talks before. So when this question did come up, I was like, oh, hey, I get what he's saying, and this is actually pretty important.
Exceed. Yeah, so there's a lot of systems like with the queuing system in particular where, I mean, that system is pretty dumb at the end of the day. It's basically whatever it is you just happen to go through and do, that is going to overwrite whatever the next action is in the queue. So there's a little bit of a learning curve on the player's part in order to, one of the issues that we have with the queuing system is people will sometimes overload that buffer and not realize they've just replaced the thing they wanted to do with a different type of input. So you actually have to encourage patience for players. So there's a lot of nuance to that. I don't know if I'm fully necessarily answering your question, but it is a tricky puzzle, and you just have to kind of continually test and see. The only way to find out whether or not you've actually struck that balance is by putting it in front of people and to see if they're running into the same problems over and over again. So thank you. No worries, thank you.
Nice.
Go for it.
This was a fantastic talk.
Oh, thank you so much.
Also, that voice, I'm just saying. Did Steve Bloom just kind of showed up at this panel, or what happened?
It's not even a question, more of like, I guess, an exercise. Question is, you pared back fighting to match the audience and also the platform, being mobile, right? So simplifying inputs. But it was also to kind of make the game a bit more casual and approachable. How do you then think about how those same sort of learnings and goals might apply going back to a more complex input medium, like a fighting stick or console game, and if it would even apply?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of games that, in past years, there's obviously been a large effort made by, much larger fighting game companies and whatnot to kind of create an accessible experience for people. Some of that is input driven. It's finding ways to have simplified inputs. You've probably seen that in a bunch of other games. Some of it might just be the theming, like Street Fighter 6 in particular, even though I haven't played obviously the full version yet. There's a lot that they do to basically make you feel comfortable within this world by even having a lot of non-fighting game stuff that you're doing from the get-go. So it's really cool to see that a lot of companies are prioritizing finding ways in which you can kind of just, there's a few avenues for that. One is, how can you make players feel comfortable, like I mentioned before? And sometimes that has nothing to do with fighting, and sometimes it has to do with just kind of giving you a core set of moves that you can learn along the way. So I think that all the stuff that I've ultimately spoken to, the broad topics can be applied, and we are, now that we are developers for the original console game as well, we certainly have hopes and plans to kind of apply some of those lessons to the console experience too. So.
Thank you.
Nice. Yeah. Very good answer.
My question is, how do you decide when to allocate complexity to?
I ended up hanging out with a bunch of folks that asked questions for 2 hours. After the talk, much more conductive to proper discussion. Oh, I can imagine so. Like I said before, like GDC is a great place to have those conversations. Very much like-minded people, like-minded intelligent people that are there that definitely are eager to learn, but also like are eager to kind of share stories or share experiences, and also like thoughts on the mechanic or whatnot. So yeah, no, you were in really good hands at GDC, and this is typically how it is most of the time anyway. So yeah, GDC is a lot of fun. It's a place I always look at it as a place to learn every time. Also to get hired too, as well, to find a job as well.
Fighting actions versus the RPG elements like status effects.
That's a really good question. So, I mean, our thought was always, I want to say that the answer I was going to give is like we carefully analyzed all the various options and chose only the most essential bits as being the things that would be tied to something basic like a swipe down that's always one gesture away. When in part it was almost, we felt like, hey, if you swipe down, I would probably expect that to be a trip. And it's like, okay, we have a trip. Let's make sure our trip is really useful. And we'll go through and keep adding properties to it to make sure that all of those different components become meaningful. So we wanted to make sure we didn't add too much complexity to the base stuff, so there was enough for you to just kind of keep in RAM that these are the core things you ultimately do. Stuff like, there are things like we have a stun, for example, in Skullgirls Mobile. That is a property. There are stuns and dizzies and whatnot that you'll see in classic fighting games too. By abstracting it to the RPG layer, to be honest, the main reason why we would move something to the RPG layer is we want RPG systems to be able to interact with it in a more meaningful way, which basically gives us like a broader language to be able to create more variants and new variations on characters that also kind of then encourage different types of gameplay. So as I figured that out on the fly, that's probably the governing philosophy. So yeah, no worries, thank you. I've given up on restating the question. I'm so sorry for
Yeah, so my question is kind of similar to Marcus's. So, one thing I've seen with a lot of games that do kind of simplify fighting mechanics is I can see players tend to build some bad habits sometimes.
Yeah, this was another important question actually.
Like low blocking, you like remove side switching, which is like makes it a lot more accessible. But then, if a player goes from that to like actual Skullgirls, then they just get destroyed. Like,
Yeah.
left and right and everything. So I was wondering if that was something you guys thought about, and if you, I guess, if you thought of any like potential solutions for that, or if you were thinking about it at all.
Yeah, I think that the mobile experience is kind of similar but different enough that I think players are generally able to kind of contextualize some of that a little bit. I kind of think of it a little bit if the developing mastery in Skullgirls Mobile. If you think of that as part of your general journey to become good at fighting games or Skullgirls, in particular the console game, I like to think of it as like a base camp on the way up the mountain itself. And there's enough distinct stuff there where the moment you realize, oh, I can cross over onto the opposite side of this other person, that's a thing that I didn't have to deal with before. That is something new that you have to learn, but it's not necessarily, I don't think it necessarily manifests as a bad habit. It's just this is the additional layer of complexity that's been unlocked by me going through and accessing this different version of this familiar experience. And so some stuff will carry over, like managing your meter and having familiarity with the properties of certain moves that are shared between the games. But some of those other techniques that you need to learn, like high-low blocking and cross-ups and all that stuff that's really complicated, you kind of, I think players that are trying to go through and make that jump have the understanding of like, I'm diving into the deep end of the pool now, and I need to be ready for different types of experiences. So I can't just safely block, even though, just holding back, can be effective, especially if you're playing against another player of a similar skill level. That'll still work like 80% of the time. It's only when you, unfortunately, match up against someone who's way more powerful that you just get opened up immediately.
AKA running into Seb at 3 a.m. And just getting absolutely destroyed for any poor soul that runs into them. But yeah, no, this is actually a really important point that was made. It's interesting too, because like I honestly would love to see like an SG Mobile player come from SG Mobile on Second Encore and then get pretty good at it. Like I would love to see that transition and see how that looks like. Because yeah, SG Mobile basically is like the building blocks, as Zug said. Like it is it is like hey, this is what a fighting game could look like for you if you decide to jump on the other side and start practicing and start learning Second Encore. Like this is the stuff that you can do in Second Encore. This is like a taste. This is a little taste of what's possible. And if you like that, then you're more than welcome to either stay on SG Mobile or come over to the other side, and we'll teach you the ropes on how to do the cool shit.
I don't know if that answers your question fully, but
yeah, no, that pretty much.
All right, cool, awesome, no worries. Thanks so much, appreciate it. Go for it.
Hey, thanks for the talk.
Yeah.
I was curious, as a more PvE-centered game, how early on in the playtesting process, a lot of other fighting games have difficulty in PvE because maybe playing against an AI isn't as engaging as like a real person. So how did you design around requiring to have sort of a complex AI versus having more of your like RPG trial elements early on while you're doing your playtesting?
Yeah, I mean, the notion of no one wants to actually play a tutorial is a tricky thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we are intended to be an accessible mobile game as a service, and so there's a lot of familiar things that you might experience from other early game experiences where certain fights are relatively easy, your opponent is underpowered relative to where you currently are. Basically kind of creating an environment where players have the maximum chance of feeling potent and they can fail safely without ultimately being punished. I'm not sure if I'm necessarily fully answering the question, but I think just in general there are just a lot of techniques in terms of the moment-to-moment experience design of just ensuring that, again, we do have a tutorial that teaches you some of those basic moves, but a lot of those extra concepts, a lot of it is we just kind of shove you out into the world and say, just go and start playing and just try around with the tools at your disposal.
Trial by fire.
Try different things, just experiment, and hopefully that is, rather than, I mean, it's a debate that we have, there may be benefits. We might have even better performance if we railroaded people a little bit more. That's why you do A/B tests and whatnot. But we ultimately found was most effective was just letting people kind of showing them the tools and then letting them start to play on their own, and then they kind of organically discover a lot of this stuff and build their own internal model of what a successful set of tactics are. And then there's things in the game where we redirect people to YouTube videos that other players have provided that give you that more detailed, this is the right way to play if that's something that you're more interested in doing. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much. Oh, sorry. Are we out of time? Do we have 5 minutes? Or I don't know if that's it. Stop. You're out of time, or you have 5 minutes. Okay, I'm just going to keep going, and then you can yeah. All right, cool. Sounds good. One more, I guess, of each. Go for it.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks again for the talk. Super useful.
Yeah, no worries.
One of the things you guys mentioned, or one of the things you mentioned was that as you guys were looking at how to make the management for your special moves, that one of the things you considered was like a Clash Royale style, like kind of meter system, right?
Yeah.
And you said that you guys kind of leaned away from that because the math would have been like kind of like too complex in real time.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask was, we do see things similar to that in other fighting games, right? Where it's like you have like a bunch of meter, your super cost meter, right? You have EX moves that also kind of use that meter.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, how do you find that balance with that, right? Where preventing that math from becoming too complex and too much for the player to handle, right? And making it kind of like just right.
Sure. I mean, personally, I feel like that is a thing that I still struggle with in classic fighting games. I often will make those types of mistakes where I misjudge exactly how much meter a particular thing uses. Some games are more straightforward. The fewer options you have for how you drain the meter, the less likely you are to encounter that. I mean, for us, the solution, as you saw, was basically we just flattened it entirely, and it's like, it's binary. Either that move's ready or it's not ready. You don't even need to worry about it. Like, don't even think about it. It's either filled up or it hasn't. And that just inherently was just so much more intuitive for people, such that it was just one less thing for them to worry about. So I would love for classic fighting games to do a better job of doing some of that stuff too. Especially because, I mean, you can segment a meter in a gazillion different ways, but yeah, it can be pretty tricky to go through and master that stuff in general. So thank you. No worries. Thanks so much. Go for it. Yeah.
Hey, so I found especially interesting when you use the blue robot ladies ability to teach some of the fighting.
Blue robot ladies, let's go.
How do you decide how fast to introduce these things so that casual players have time to learn and the hardcore players like have the challenge for them?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. RPG features are available relatively early on in the game, like the special abilities for various characters. You have to upgrade them enough before those things start to pop in. So for the first, whatever it is, 10 fights that you might have in story mode and whatnot, none of that stuff is really manifesting. We don't have special modifiers or anything like that. It's just the basics of going through and fighting. Then every once in a while, you'll start to see a bleed will pop up, and oh my god, I need to learn what's going on. Why is my health meter draining its damage over time? Oh, I can remove it by tagging out, or if I get regeneration, it'll cancel it out, etc., etc. So we have like a special tutorial that teaches that stuff, but we really try to slowly go through and drip feed that stuff. So a lot of it is also, it's a mobile free-to-play game, and so there's different rarities of characters, and generally speaking, bronze characters are much simpler in terms of the concepts that they're introducing, whereas blue screen, which is a gold, is a lot more complicated. And so just organically, while you're playing through the game, you're less likely to be engaging with the more complicated versions of these characters early on in the game. So you just kind of slowly start to dig into that stuff a little bit more. And then usually when you encounter those obstacles, it prompts you to kind of rummage through your own collection to figure out what kind of counters do I have. Maybe I haven't read all the abilities for my own existing characters, and we're trying to find ways in which we can better surface that in the game as well. So cool. Thank you.
Dope.
Thanks so much.
Dope.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, good panel. Good Q&A. Oh man, yeah, that was a great panel. Hang on, I'm gonna go ahead and put the music back on. There we go. Okay. No, it was a great panel. I think there's a lot of like good information in that video. And I think like it's because like there definitely is like a very challenging like aspect of like how do you make a fighting game into a mobile game and still make it fun and still make it as fun it is for players who know the game and have played the game but now can play this version, or for people who like would like to play Skullgirls but does not have to know how or wherewithal to keep practicing, keep playing the game. It's often the thing I keep hearing about from a lot of fans and a lot of people saying like, hey, I love watching Skullgirls, but I cannot play a fighting game because fighting games are hard. And that's often what I hear a lot from a lot of people when talking about fighting games in general in the casual space. But this is definitely a way to show them like, oh hey, this is what it looks like to be at my level, like, or at a the Kill Sage or Sonic level. So it's like, hey, this is what it feels like, and it's like, oh, this is really cool. I want to do that cool thing. Like, and oftentimes, like, either they'll stay on mobile or they'll, like, get curious and jump on the other side. Just to experience what second encore is. So it's cool. Like, it's definitely, like, the best balance of what a fighting game should feel like on mobile. That appeals both audiences. And yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I think that SG Mobile is, like, probably one of the best, if not the best, fighting game RPG out there. And it's definitely, like, has helped the entire Skullgirls community a lot for a number of good reasons. And it's just, yeah, without them, we would not be here today. So, you know, shout out to Hidden Bearable. They really saved their asses. But yeah, no, like, again, it's great talk. I think it's like, what's we're looking for? Eye-opening, I guess. And yeah, like, it's really cool. I definitely love, like, what has happened in the last few years. Yes, much love, Zug. Much love. What was it? Yeah. I was gonna say something else, but I totally forgot. Oh no, I'll do that. I'll do that off stream. I had a question, but, like, I'll save that for later. Okay. So, I almost hit my 2 hour mark. I'm actually, like, 20 minutes away. Hang on, let me just do something real quick. I cannot talk tonight. Oh, let me get a little closer so you can actually see me. There we go. Hey, what's up, folks? So yeah, no, it was a pretty cool video tonight, and I think it's very awesome. And for those who are watching this later on YouTube, boy, you guys missed out. I mean, to be fair, I didn't know that the devs wouldn't be here in my chat this entire time I was watching the video. But, like, hey, you know, it was exciting times, as they may say. So yeah, being the streams was happening so that you can actually interact with cool peoples. Just check out the other SG Mobile GTD talk at some point. It's only about 15 minutes. Can you probably another stream? Oh, heck yeah. I didn't know you had another SGM or another talk. Heck yeah. I'll definitely, if it's online, I'll look for it. I'll definitely get hold of it and watch another one. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, this will probably do it for me for tonight. I just wanted to come on and check out this video and give my viewpoints on it, which is basically, like, SGM, good, keep doing what you're doing, guys. Nothing really objective on my end. So it's just I would, yeah, stuff like this is always very fascinating for me. Okay, so before we go, we got to take some talk about some in-house ads real quick. So if you enjoyed the stream and these discussions that's about SG Mobile and all that jazz, we have a Patreon. Support the work we do on playskullgirls.gg, as well as on SG Molly on Twitter and other social medias. It is behind the scenes stuff you can support us with, future plans, and also be supporting the scenes at the same time. Patreon.com/SGMolly. You can go ahead and check that out. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's definitely in the link in the description and below. Let's check it out. Also, we are sponsored by 86.com. These folks have been sponsoring us for a very long time. I work with them for a very long time, and they're cool peeps. And if you like video game apparel, especially Skullgirls, they have that on 86.com. Check it out. If you are watching the stream, the link under the stream, there's a link in one of the panels from us right into the website. You can buy, and if you do that, we'll get a cut. They'll get a cut. Everyone's happy. So definitely check it out. 86.com. And with that, give me a second here, guys. All right. I don't think there was any new follows tonight, but we're gonna check real quick. I don't think there has been any new follows. But I could be surprised. Yeah, I thought so. Okay, cool. Yeah. Pretty chill night. Alright, that's fine. We are going to go ahead and just get ready to go and raid somebody. So give me a second here as I look for somebody to go and raid. Share the wealth, as they say. Let me check. Hang on. Let's check. Oh, I'm on the SG Mobile. That's right. Let's see. Who be streaming? Let me check. Categories. Oh wow. Okay. Oh hey, he's streaming again. Nice. Cool. Okay. Although I'm not the only one streaming SG Mobile. Let's see. You know what? It probably should be another category I should follow actually. Give me a second. Skullgirls Mobile. Okay. Who else is streaming? There's this dude. Let me just double check real quick. Making sure that everything's a-okay. Nothing is showing up. Okay, he might be done for today. And then, okay, we got another person streaming, but there's no camera, no voice. Okay. I'm going to throw an audible here, actually. Let's see. Oh yeah, no problem. No problem. I'm surprised you showed up. Actually, I did not expect that to happen. So, much thanks. Much thanks. Let's see. Let's go. Who am I gonna send? Oh, okay. I know. Okay, well, it's a little different type of of content. I hope you guys don't mind. All right, we're gonna send you to Shamita. Oh wait. Okay, yeah, we're gonna send you to Shamita Tiger. She is also an FGC content creator. She's a VTuber, and she's cool in that aspect. So she's doing ASMR stuff, so it's gonna be a little interesting in that perspective. But it's new, it's different. But you know, hey, just sharing the fighting game love. Anyways, okay, all right, guys. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and rate her. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back next week for another edition of Opening Night.